To truly understand the dark terror unfolding in the kingdom of Olam, one must remember the heavy blood spilled in the past. Sudika, the greatest tracker in the land, was brutally betrayed and stabbed by his trusted brothers, Kachi, and his younger sibling during the royal hunt for the black leopard. Tossed into a forgotten mountain pit, the dying hunter's body was completely taken over by the ancient trapped demonic spirits of Zikoro. Bound together for survival, Sudika used this terrifying new strength to escape the pit, expose the wicked traitors, and claim his rightful victory. But in the shadows lays a darkness no one is seeing. The great King Zubari, who was strong and healthy, mysteriously died after being beaten by an unknown monster. With the king dead, Sudika was crowned the new supreme ruler, completely unaware that the monster he thought he controlled was actually hiding comfortably inside his own body, sitting directly on the royal throne. New season came. It began with absolute peace and beautiful harmony throughout the entire kingdom. Everyone deeply loved King Sudika's rule. He took perfect care of the kingdom's affairs, making sure the markets were full and the borders were heavily protected. He moved his proud aging father and mother from their small village hut into a grand special chamber right inside the royal palace. But while he showed massive love to his people, he showed absolutely no mercy to his enemies. Kachi's broken parents came to the palace gates countless times. They fell to their knees in the dirt, weeping bitterly and begging the new king to have mercy on their imprisoned children. But Sudika never listened. His heart turned completely hard whenever he looked at them. He had absolutely no mercy left to give, heavily promising the weeping parents that he would make absolutely sure the two traitors rotted completely away inside the deep, dark dungeon. After the terrifying night he first sat on the massive throne, the ancient spirit completely changed his behavior. It seemed like the dark voices inside his head had gone entirely silent. There were absolutely no more wicked whispers and no more terrifying demonic laughter echoing in his mind. Sudika finally felt alone in his own head. But then, on one quiet night, a terrible, heavy nightmare attacked his sleep. In the dark dream, Sudika watched helplessly as a massive, unseen monster completely destroyed the kingdom of Olam. The village was thrown into absolute chaos. People were running, screaming and crying heavily, begging the ancient gods to come down and save them from the walking plague. Before Sudika could even understand what was happening, the entire kingdom was reduced to complete ruin. Dead bodies were scattered across the dirt, the wild animals were slaughtered, and every green plant completely died. The dream turned even darker. The sky turned thick, pitch black, and the heavy rain began to fall. But it was not water, it was thick dark blood pouring from the clouds. Sudika realized he was the absolute only person left alive. When the unseen monster finally disappeared, he slowly stepped out of his hiding spot into the middle of the absolute destruction. He suddenly noticed thick blood violently dripping from his own hands. He raised his heavy hands to his face, realizing with pure terror that the blood belonged to his people. He woke up violently, breathing heavily in the dark. He quickly wiped the sweat from his face, aggressively convincing himself it was just a mere dream. He refused to overthink it, choosing to push the heavy nightmare completely out of his mind. A few full moons passed peacefully. He never heard the dark voice again, but he could still feel that unusual, rushing energy burning deeply through his veins. Even though Sudika felt perfectly normal during the day, Queen Nneka started noticing deeply terrifying things in the dead of night. She would often wake up to hear her husband violently murmuring to himself in his sleep. The most terrifying part was that he was not speaking their normal language. He was aggressively murmuring dark, ancient words and heavy spiritual incantations that made the air in the royal bedroom feel unnaturally freezing. On several occasions, Nneka would wake up to find the bed completely empty. She would walk out into the cold night to find Sudika standing perfectly still in the high outer chamber, staring blankly down at the sleeping kingdom. Nneka would gently call out to her husband, asking what was bothering his mind to keep him awake. But Sudika would absolutely never say a single word. He would simply turn around with a completely blank, empty face, walk slowly back to the bed, and go straight to sleep. The next morning, when Nneka questioned him, Sudika would completely deny the entire event. He honestly had absolutely no memory of waking up or walking around the palace. At first, Nneka simply waved it away, guessing that the heavy stress of ruling the kingdom was just causing him to sleepwalk. But deep down in her spirit, she felt a heavy terror. This was not a normal sleepwalker. Something felt incredibly wrong, but she simply could not piece her dark suspicions together. Days passed, and peace and order continued to flow through the village. The people deeply loved the king and the beautiful queen, but the dark peace was about to be violently shattered. Deep under the palace, the royal guards carried heavy bowls of food down the dark, twisting stone stairs to feed the prisoners. When they arrived at the deepest cell, they noticed Kachi and his younger brother were not moving at all. The guards loudly called out their names, banging heavily on the thick iron bars, but the two traitors remained completely still on the dead floor. The guards quickly unlocked the heavy cell to check on them. The moment they stepped inside, a terrible rotting smell forcefully hit their noses. It hit them hard that the two brothers were completely dead. Their bodies were freezing cold and their eyes were wide open, locked in an expression of absolute freezing terror. Looking closer at the bodies, the guards noticed signs of a violent, heavy struggle. The death was kicked up and the brothers' fingernails were broken from desperately fighting an unseen attacker. But the most terrifying discovery was on their necks. Deep in their skin was the exact same dark, bruised human teeth bite mark that had mysteriously killed King Zubari. The horrific news quickly whispered through the dark palace halls, eventually reaching the village where Kachi's parents mourned their two dead sons bitterly. But surprisingly, the people of the kingdom did not think much about the terrifying mystery. They simply whispered that the wicked brothers had angered the gods and finally received the dark punishment they completely deserved. Even King Sudika could not explain what had happened inside his own dungeon. Because the village felt the traitors deserved their violent end, absolutely no one in the kingdom tried to find out the truth, completely unaware that a hungry, ancient monster was already freely walking among them in the dead of night. The discovery of the dead brothers completely shattered the peace of the royal palace. King Sudika was deeply worried, knowing perfectly well that a dangerous monster was somehow inside his own heavily guarded walls. He immediately ordered a total lockdown of the palace. Every single heavy wooden door was barricaded, and elite guards were commanded to search every dark corner and underground tunnel. Sudika took the investigation into his own hands. Relying on his unmatched skills as a master tracker, he personally inspected the dirt floor of the dark dungeon. He noticed a very strange pattern that made absolutely no sense to him. He found fresh, barefoot human footprints deeply pressed into the mud near the dead bodies. But the confusing part was the direction of the tracks. The human footprints did not lead outside toward the palace walls or the forest. Instead, they simply walked to the bottom of the main stone stairs and completely vanished, as if the killer had just walked back up into the main palace halls and disappeared. While Sudika and his guards focused heavily on searching the inside of the royal palace, a sudden, horrifying event struck the kingdom outside the walls. The pattern of the monster targeting only the enemies of the king was violently broken. Early one morning, the village woke up to a terrifying scream. A massive, heavily built adult blacksmith was found completely dead right outside his own forge. When the village healers rushed to examine the fallen man, they found the exact same dark, heavily bruised human teeth, bite mark resting deeply on his thick neck. The monster had officially left the royal palace and was now randomly hunting innocent, strong adults in the middle of the village. Pure freezing panic completely took over the kingdom of Olam. The bustling markets were instantly abandoned, and farmers refused to walk to their fields. Before the sun even began to set, the terrified people locked the heavy wooden doors and completely hid inside their huts, terrified of the unseen walking plague. King Sudika was thrown into absolute panic. He was completely desperate to protect his innocent people from this evil, unknown threat. Falling back on his greatest natural strength, he decided that if there was a savage beast hunting his kingdom, he would trap it like a master hunter. He ordered the construction of a massive, heavy iron cage right in the center of the open village square. He specifically stationed his bravest, strongest adult warriors around the square as live bait, armed heavily with thick wooden spears. Refusing to rest or trust anyone else with the task, Sudika climbed to the very top of a high wooden watchtower overlooking the trap. He held his heavy weapons tightly, absolutely determined to stay awake the entire night and destroy the monster the exact moment it stepped into the light. Deep in the middle of the night, the village went completely silent. A thick, heavy fog slowly rolled into the dead square. Up in the high watchtower, Sudika kept his eyes wide open, aggressively scanning the shadows. But suddenly, he felt that strange rushing energy boil deeply in his veins. A massive, splitting headache violently struck the back of his head. His vision immediately began to blur. Sudika fought desperately to keep his eyes open, forcefully gripping the wooden rail of the tower to stay on his feet. But the dark energy completely overwhelmed his human mind. Without making a single sound, his conscious mind went completely dark, and he violently collapsed onto the wooden floor of the watchtower, passing out completely cold. When Sudika finally opened his eyes, the bright morning sun was shining heavily. But he was no longer lying on the hard wooden floor of the watchtower. He was lying comfortably in his own soft royal bed inside the palace. He sat up in pure blinding confusion. He had absolutely no memory of leaving the watchtower or walking back to his chambers. Driven by deep fear, he rushed outside and ran straight to the village square. He found absolute destruction. The heavy iron cage he had built was completely torn apart, its thick metal bars bent and shattered by raw, unnatural human strength. His elite adult guards were scattered across the dirt, completely unconscious and heavily beaten. The mysterious monster had successfully attacked the trap and completely escaped yet again, leaving absolutely no trace of its face. Meanwhile, back in the quiet royal chamber, Queen Nneka discovered something deeply terrifying. While making the royal bed, she looked down and saw thick, dark, muddy human footprints staining the floor. The terrifying footprints led directly from the chamber door, straight to the side of the bed where Sudika had just been sleeping. Trembling in pure terror and completely unsure of what it meant, the queen quickly grabbed a cloth and wiped the mud away, hiding the dark secret entirely to herself. Determined to protect his kingdom, King Sudika convinced himself that if the monster was not hiding inside the palace, it must have escaped into the deep wild. He gathered his absolute best elite adult guards, armed them with heavy weapons, and personally led them deep into the dark forest to hunt the beast. They trekked through the thick bushes for hours, completely alert and ready for a heavy fight. But suddenly, deep in the middle of the dark woods, the terrifying cycle repeated itself. That strange rushing energy violently boiled in Sudika's veins. A massive headache struck him. His vision went completely black and he passed out cold on the forest floor. When Sudika finally regained his conscious mind, he opened his eyes to absolute horror. He was standing on his feet, breathing heavily. In his right hand, He was gripping his heavy iron sword, completely covered in fresh, dripping blood. He looked down at his own hands and his hunting gear, seeing thick blood stains everywhere. He slowly looked around the dirt clearing. His elite guards were scattered across the forest floor, completely massacred. They lay absolutely motionless. Dropping his sword, Sudika walked closer to the bodies. He saw deep, fatal slashes, but the most terrifying detail was the dark, bruised human teeth, bite marks completely tearing the necks of his fallen soldiers. In that freezing moment, every single terrifying clue perfectly clicked together in his mind. He remembered the heavy footprints that always vanished near his chamber. He remembered the sudden death of King Zubari happening exactly when he arrived at the palace. He remembered his blackouts, the destroyed iron trap, and the creepy demonic laugh he heard the night he took the throne. The horrific truth crashed down on him. There was no unknown monster roaming the kingdom. He was the monster. It had been him the entire time. Overwhelmed by the dark truth, Sudika fell heavily to his knees in the bloody dirt, completely breaking down in quiet sobs. Suddenly, he heard a weak rustling sound in the dry leaves. One of the elite guards was miraculously still alive. The man was heavily wounded and had just regained consciousness after losing massive amounts of blood. But the exact moment the wounded guard opened his eyes and saw King Sudika, pure panic took over his face. Treating the king exactly like a terrifying beast, the bleeding guard frantically started crawling backward on the dirt, screaming loudly for help. Sudika completely froze. His heart raced. He knew instantly that if this guard survived and returned to the kingdom, the terrible secret would be exposed. Sudika would immediately lose the royal throne, his honor, his parents' pride, and worst of all, Queen Nneka would look at him as a disgusting monster. Faced with a heavy choice, Sudika chose his own survival. Driven by absolute fear and deep selfish greed, he stepped forward. Ignoring the helpless man's tears, Sudika brutally silenced the crawling guard forever, making absolutely sure no one would ever tell his dark secret. The exact moment the guard took his last breath, the ancient voice finally broke its long silence. A deep, creepy laugh aggressively echoed inside Sudika's mind. The dark spirit mocked the king, heavily pointing out that there was absolutely no difference between Sudika and the two brothers who had betrayed him in the pit. The demon whispered that Sudika had just brutally murdered an innocent, helpless brother simply to protect his own greedy ambition. The ancient spirit declared that they were a perfect match because the dark evil was not just in the demon, it was deeply rooted in Sudika's human mind as well. The voice proudly claimed that they had committed the bloody massacre together. Desperate and shaking, Sudika asked his own mind if his terrible suspicions were true. The dark voice proudly confirmed it, but chillingly added that this massive slaughter was only the beginning. When Sudika asked why the spirit was doing this to him, the demon calmly answered that Sudika was specifically chosen because his hidden darkness made him the absolute perfect vessel to achieve its ancient goals. After that heavy promise, the voice went completely silent. Sudika sat in the dark forest until the sun went down. Under the heavy cover of night, he quietly sneaked back into the royal palace, using the secret, forgotten layout he had discovered during his revenge. He immediately stripped off his blood-stained items, securely hiding them deep inside a heavy wooden chest in his private chamber, and quickly washed the dark blood from his skin. When he finally stepped out into the palace, the chiefs and guards were deeply worried about why the king had returned completely alone in the dark. Sudika smoothly lied. He claimed that the elite guards had found a highly dangerous trail and strictly advised the king to stay behind at the edge of the forest for his own safety while they pushed deeper into the wild. Because the soldiers did not return that night, the palace fell into heavy anxiety. The very next morning, King Sudika sent out a massive search party. By evening, the group returned carrying the brutally destroyed bodies of the elite guards. The terrible news spread like wildfire. Pure panic completely swallowed the kingdom of Olam. Dark rumors quickly spread that an unstoppable beast lived deep inside the forest. Terrified hunters completely refused to enter the trees, believing the absolute greatest danger was hiding in the wild. They had absolutely no idea that the real monster was resting comfortably right on the royal throne. While the kingdom looked toward the forest, Queen Nneka felt a heavy, terrifying suspicion growing inside the palace. The king's dark sleepwalking and his strange behavior had already put fear in her heart. But one quiet afternoon, while searching for something deep inside the heavy wooden chests in their private royal chamber, she found something that completely stopped her breathing. Hidden at the very bottom of the chest were the exact items her husband had worn on the day the guards were massacred. They were completely soaked in thick dried blood. Nneka stared at the dark stains, her hands shaking violently. Her darkest fears were slowly coming together. The terrifying thought echoed in her mind. The walking plague destroying their people was not an animal in the woods. Was it her beloved husband? Queen Nneka needed absolute proof to confirm her terrifying suspicions. For several nights, she laid in the royal bed, pretending to be completely fast asleep. She kept her breathing perfectly steady and deep, but she left her eyes slightly open in the dark shadows, carefully watching her husband's every single move. Finally, the dreaded blackout arrived. She watched Sudika's heavy body violently stiffen on the bed. He sat up slowly, but his movements were completely unnatural and rigid. As he turned his face toward the moonlight shining through the window, Nneka saw his eyes. They had turned completely pitch black. The ancient demon had successfully taken the wheel. The possessed king quietly slipped out of the chamber. Nneka silently followed him from a safe distance, tracking him deep into the outer palace gardens. Hiding behind a thick ancient tree, she witnessed absolute horror unfold in the moonlight. A group of heavily armed adult night guards were patrolling the garden grounds. Moving with terrifying, savage speed, Sudika violently ambushed them. Nneka covered her mouth to trap her own screams. She watched in pure terror as her husband effortlessly crushed the strong adult warriors, violently throwing them to the dirt before delivering the fatal, poisonous teeth bite directly to their necks. Her darkest fears were fully confirmed. The great king was the walking plague tearing the kingdom apart. Desperate not to be caught, Nneka ran frantically back to the royal chamber. She climbed into bed, forcing herself to lay perfectly still. Moments later, Sudika returned. Nneka kept her eyes closed, listening to the horrific sounds of her husband frantically washing the thick, dark blood from his skin in the corner of the room. A few nights later, the heavy tension in the royal chamber finally reached its breaking point. While they were completely alone behind locked doors, Nneka pulled the heavily blood-stained items from the hidden chest. Without making a single sound, she dropped the bloody proof directly onto the floor in front of Sudika. She told her dear husband everything she had learned about his dark secrets and who he truly is. Seeing his darkest secret exposed, Sudika completely panicked. The heavy guilt and terror broke him entirely. He fell heavily to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Breaking down completely, he revealed the entire horrific truth through his tears. He explained the dark encounter in the forgotten pit, the ancient spirit of Zikoro, the heavy blackouts, and the terrifying voice echoing in his mind. He pleaded desperately with his wife, showing her that he had absolutely no idea how to control the dark monster taking over his physical body in the night. Sudika fully expected his wife to run away in fear or call the palace guards to execute him. But Nneka did not run, she did not scream. Instead, she knelt down on the floor right beside him. She gently held his shaking, blood-stained hands comforting him deeply. Through soothing gestures and calm reassurance, she made him understand that he was not alone. She assured him that they were in this terrible nightmare completely together. She promised him with absolute confidence that there was a hidden solution to this cause, and she would personally help him find a way to be completely free of the monster. Sudika wept in her arms, feeling a deep sense of relief and completely trusting his loving queen. But as she hugged her crying husband, Nneka looked out the high window overlooking the massive kingdom. Behind her comforting face, a dark, wicked ambition burned fiercely in her eyes. Deep down, Queen Nneka had absolutely no intention of curing him or exposing his bloody secret to the people. She perfectly knew the strict ancient laws of Olam. If the king falls or is executed for his crimes, women are absolutely forbidden to sit on the throne. Exposing the monster meant she would instantly be stripped of her heavy crown, losing all her massive royal power, her absolute authority, and her endless wealth. Faced with a choice between saving her innocent people or keeping her heavy crown, Nneka chose her own extreme greed. She chose absolute silence. She would use the monster to keep her absolute power over the kingdom. Deep inside Sudika's mind, the ancient demonic spirit watched the queen's dark decision. The demon let out a deep, terrifying laugh. It finally realized the absolute truth. It did not need to corrupt the human world, because the human heart was already just as dark, greedy, and wicked as the demon itself. The truth is finally out, but it is trapped behind the locked doors of the royal palace. What do you think about Queen Nneka's dark decision? Instead of running from the monster, she chose to protect it, just to keep her heavy wealth and royal power. Do you think human greed is actually more terrifying than the ancient demon itself? Now that the queen knows the bloody truth and wants to use the beast for her own advantage, exactly how much worse will the kingdom of Olam suffer? Drop your deep thoughts and theories in the comment section below, and make sure you watch out for season 3 of this massive legend to see what happens when the two monsters ruling the kingdom completely clash.